Thanks, Andre, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining this session today, Harnessing Crisis Dashboards for Decision Intelligence. So I'm Marwa, and I work as a data specialist with UNDP's Crisis Bureau. I've been supporting the work on crisis risk dashboards for the past 5 years. I'll be your guide for the next 2 hours. Normally, we might have a couple of presenters splitting the time, but today you're stuck with me. So be with me, and I'll do my best to keep things simple and useful. So yeah, I guess we've got a great group here. I assume from different backgrounds, some technical, some less so. And this session is designed with that in mind. So accessible if you're newer to dashboards, but with enough depth to keep our more data savvy colleagues engaged. Our focus is on how UNDP's Crisis Risk Dashboard, or CRD, can help us turn complex data into clear insights for decision-making, especially in a crisis context. Or in other words, or in simple terms, bridging the gap between numbers and actions. I'll walk you through examples, we will do a hands-on exercise, and I'll sprinkle in some interactive polls and also short discussions, so it won't be just me talking the whole time. And just also another note, I will keep looking over the other screen since that's where I have my presentation and my notes. So if it looks like I'm not looking directly at the camera, don't worry, I'm still here, just managing the content from the other side. Okay, so before we dive in, let's warm up a bit, and I would like to kickstart with a quick icebreaker so I can get a sense of your experiences with dashboards. So we have a quick Mentimeter poll to start. Feel free to take out your phones to scan the QR code, or you can also go to mentimeter.com and enter the code in the screen. You'll find a question, how familiar are you with data dashboards, like UNDP's crisis dashboards or other Power BI dashboards? You'll find multiple options, ranging from never used one to a dashboard pro. So please go ahead and feel free to submit your answers. I'll give everyone a moment while we see the answers on the screen. I'm gonna switch the view just to look at the answers. Okay. Good. So we have a range of different answers. I've never used one, seen a few, but never made one. Okay, no Dashboard Pro. Good. Let's wait for more answers to come in.
Colleagues, for those of you who weren't able to scan the code, I shared the link to the Menti in the chat.
Thanks, Andre. Great. So yeah, see we have different experiences, and this is why we designed the session to meet all the technical differences in this session. Okay. Great. Cool. Let's get me back to the presentation. Let me know if you can see my screen. Make this.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So just quickly before jumping into the content, let's maybe review our learning objectives for today. So by the end of the session, you should be able to do all the things listed here. First, understand what a crisis risk dashboard is and how it's developed. We will clarify the concept of the CRD and also walk through how one is created. This is just to make sure that everyone is on the same page about the basics. The second thing is apply multidimensional risk lens to crisis data, because we know crisis situations aren't one dimension. They involve conflicts, socioeconomic factors, natural hazards. So we will learn how to look at all these dimensions together using data like conflict events databases or risk indices or food security data sets. And third, you'll get hands-on with Power BI, which is, of course, a data visualization tool, very popular to turn raw data into visuals. And don't worry, if you've never used Power BI, we will introduce it first and do a simple exercise visualizing real crisis data. We'll also highlight good design practices for designing effective dashboards, because we know good design is key to making a dashboard clear and impactful for decision-making. And finally, you will practice thinking like an analyst. This means not just creating charts, but also how to move from data to actions, asking the right questions and also derive data-driven insights for decision-making. With this with all these goals in mind, maybe let's see how we're going to start with the first session, which is introduction to the CRD and multidimensional risk analysis. So we'll be answering two fundamental questions. What is the crisis risk dashboard and why do we need it for decision intelligence? We will also explain what we mean by a multidimensional risk lens. So what is the crisis risk dashboard? So it's basically a data visualization platform that supports multidimensional risk analysis. It's developed by UNDP's Crisis Bureau to help us and also other UN agencies monitor and analyze crisis risk data. So let's break down what CRD offers, and as listed here in the slide, you will find different use cases and what the CRD can offer. Situational awareness. The CRD provides evidence for regular monitoring for fast changing and volatile situations. For example, in contexts like Côte d'Ivoire or Tunisia, the CRD was used to show current conflict events, economic stress, giving the teams and the country teams, regional teams, real-time pulse of the situation. Cross-pillar analysis, it's not just one type of data. The CRD brings together data across different pillars or sectors. So you'll find humanitarian data, development, peace, all into one platform. And this creates a sense of a joint UN-wide picture of countries' need. And this was done in Venezuela, across also regions like Asia Pacific, where we developed a regional dashboard. So in other words, let's say all UN agencies who are supporting the work of the CRD can look at the same dashboard and align their understanding of the crisis or context in a country. Advanced analytics, the platform is not just static. It can, of course, incorporate innovative data sources. We have used social media, sentiment analysis, and we've also explored doing predictive analytics, like AI and machine learning models. Had examples in Nigeria and Azerbaijan. The CRD have tested predictive features to forecast conflict or economic trends. Fourth use case, or the fourth, what CRD can offer, early warning. So the CRD helps track early warning signs by aggregating events. For example, climate-related events or disasters, conflict incidents, political developments, etc. So for countries like Sri Lanka or Mali, the dashboard has been used to highlight spikes or emerging trends that could signal worsening risk or situation in a country, which gives the team or decision makers a heads up to possible crisis. Risk-informed programming, the data informs our planning. For example, UNDP strategic frameworks like the SDCF, the CCA, CPD, can also shape by insights from the CRD. And we've had cases in Ecuador and Cambodia where the CRD data guided how we design programs by highlighting which regions or issues were most at risk. And finally, CRDs supply hard evidence for our advocacy with donors and external partners. For example, in Tunisia and Sierra Leone, the data from the dashboard has supported communications with external partners by clearly showing the needs and evolving risks. So basically, CRD is a one-stop platform that aggregates and visualizes data to help decision makers see the full risk picture and act upon it. Now, when it comes to what types of data in a CRD, you will find a variety of data sources and data sets. You'll find events databases like political violence, as I mentioned earlier. You'll find global risk indices and indicators, data on UNDP's programming, budgets, presence. We have data on news, and also social media analysis before. So basically, any type of data can be integrated in a crisis risk dashboard. So beyond just being a dashboard, the CRD really functions as an ecosystem. And by that, we mean that we have developed a CRD data warehouse, and we have the technology stack that we're using to develop our dashboards that makes it also more flexible and scalable. One of its strengths is also can work with country-specific data. So not only the data that we're providing in the data warehouse. When a country office provides us with data, we can use this data, even transform it into meaningful risk-themed indicators. And this case has been really useful when working in fragile or data-scarce environments. We also leverage a number of partnerships with external partners to expand what's possible in the CRDs. For example, we have a partnership with the European Commission where we're using their media aggregator. Columbia University, where their students support us in pilot projects from time to time. And right now, the CRD is used mostly at the regional and country levels. It's designed to provide tailored risk analytics support, whether that's during strategic planning or, for example, risk monitoring, regional monthly reviews, or even in response to crisis. Now, what problem does it solve? Why do we have the CRD? Simple answer is data overload and fragmentation. We know that in a crisis context, there is a flood of data coming at us, whether it's reports, conflict incidents, economic indicators, population data, satellite imagery, social media trends, you name it. The good news is we have a lot of data. We're not short on data. However, these data are all over the place. Each data set might be in a different format or silo. For example, you might have an Excel sheet from a field survey with its own column structure, another CSV file from a different agency with totally different format. Had cases where we work with statistical data, for example, that comes from SPSS, or maybe geospatial data like hazard maps or population distribution. They come in shape files with different, of course, naming conventions and different structure. So meanwhile, to get from an online service, you might also need to call a specific API that has its own query parameters and output formats. And I'm sure that you've had cases where you've noticed different sources use different country names or codes. For example, I've had cases where I've seen datasets that uses country Côte d'Ivoire, we call it Côte d'Ivoire, where another says Ivory Coast. Another datasets only use ISO code. So you end up doing a lot of manual matching. Same for dates, one might use year, month, day format, another writes a date in a text, for example. So all these differences means an analyst or the person who's working with the data is going to spend hours, sometimes days, just to wrangle data, finding it, cleaning it, merging it to make sense of it. And this is what we call the data tax. The time and the effort cost imposed by messy, not clean data before you clean it, before you can actually use it for insights. So the crisis risk dashboard is designed to remove or at least reduce this wrangling tax. It pulls together those different sources from different data sets, from different formats in a common structure and consistent standards. So basically it centralizes and standardizes data for you. And again, with the CRD, instead of juggling dozens of file formats, analysts or decision makers can go to one place, use the data that's already harmonized, and focus on analyzing an action rather than just data cleaning and wrangling. And this is, of course, a huge enabler when we talk about decision intelligence, because, of course, it frees us to spend our time asking, for example, what does the data tell us, rather than where do I find the right data and why the data is not cleaned. So now, having said that, we've mentioned decision intelligence. So we're going to highlight what is the decision intelligence. We used the term before, so let's clarify what it means, because it's central to the CRD concept. So in a nutshell, decision intelligence is the discipline of turning data into better decisions. Think of it as the next evolution of business intelligence. While business intelligence might tell you what is happening through reports and dashboards, decision intelligence helps answer what should we do about it. So the components, there are three main ingredients when we talk about decision intelligence. First, data. You need solid data, the facts, the figures, and the evidence. And this is just the raw material. For decision intelligence, we integrate data from multiple sources using the CRD data warehouse or different data sets to have a comprehensive view as our CRD does. So we have the data and the platform at the same time. The second ingredient is the analytics, multidimensional risk analytics. This is where we analyze data, looking for patterns, running statistical models, even sometimes using AI or machine learning to make predictions or detect any anomalies. So analytics transform this raw data into insights. For example, conflict incidents are rising in a specific province, in a specific country, or food prices are projected to spike the next month. So using these kind of tools or advanced AI or risk analytics can simulate scenarios or suggest likely outcomes, which is increasingly part of decision intelligence. The third ingredient is, of course, very important, the human expertise. Decision intelligence isn't just about computers making decisions alone. Human judgment is really important. So as experts or analysts, we provide context. We validate whether the insights make sense and apply domain knowledge. Like, for example, knowing local political dynamics or cultural factors that numbers alone don't capture. We also ask the right questions of the data. So decision intelligence at its best is a collaboration between using data analytics, machine-driven analysis, and human intuition, human judgment. So how is decision intelligence used in practice? It means that our tools like CRD don't just present data, they are used to guide decisions. For example, you will find a dashboard that's showing conflict incidents increased by 20% in the last 3 months. A decision intelligence approach would take that further, might correlate that with other data like displacement or market price. Maybe use a model to predict that happens if the trend continues, and then help the team or decision makers formulate options. Do we need to do something about it? Do we need to scale up, for example, humanitarian aid in this region, etc.? So having said that, just to summarize, the CRD is just a tool for decision intelligence. It combines rich data, analytics, even some predictive elements, and is used by human experts like you or colleagues in country offices or regional hubs to make informed decisions. So the goal is just faster, smarter, and more strategic decisions making than we would get from just manually playing around with spreadsheets or data sets. Now that we have this concepts down, CRD and decision intelligence, let's move to the practical perspective, how we can use this to analyze the situation using the CRD or looking at the multidimensional risks on the ground. So how we use this in practice? How can we analyze a situation with the CRD? So there are two key characteristics of CRD data analysis to use it. First, it's multidimensional. So unlike looking at a single data set in isolation, with a CRD, you have many layers of information. As I mentioned before, we have different data sets that are standardized, harmonized in the CRD data warehouse. This means our analysis should look for patterns across those layers. For instance, again, maybe a conflict is rising in a particular province at the same time that food prices are spiking and rainfall, for example, is failing. That combination could be significant, of course, possibly conflict causing market disruption and drought worsening food supply. So we have to be ready to connect those dots from looking at multidimensional risk lens. The second key characteristic is ongoing. So it's not just one-time report, it's continuously updated. Of course, depends on the data feeds and the data source, but we have data that updates on weekly basis. You can find data that updates on monthly basis or even daily. So to make sure that our analysis is not a static one-off, we need to frequently revisit and see how things change. Given these two key characteristics of a CRD, now, very important aspect is the analyst mentality and approach on the CRD, which involves asking, what's the story here? We don't just note numbers, but also we plot them. So we ask why are we seeing these patterns? What might explain a peak or a drop in a certain indicator? It's good to consider, of course, interrelations or correlations. Does a change in one metric correspond with a change in another? For example, again, I keep bringing the conflict example, but it's relevant to nowadays situations. So if conflict events increased, did we also see an increase in people displaced from that area? Did then reflect in higher needs in neighboring regions? So we think cause and effect carefully. Some things might move together, but is one causing the other, or are they both effects from a third factor? So this is where being an analyst means being a bit of a detective, not just taking correlations at face value, because correlation does not mean causation. So we have to be careful when we think about this. So this is just showing an example. Sudan, for example, imagine that we're analyzing the crisis in Sudan using a CRD. Sudan is indeed has a complex crisis with conflict and humanitarian issues. What kind of questions would we ask as we explore the dashboard? For example, where are the hotspots? We would likely check which regions or states in Sudan have the highest number of conflict incidents and casualties. So this tells us, for example, where insecurity is most acute. What about humanitarian factors? We would look at where people are most food insecure or where large numbers of people are displaced. Do this overlap with conflict hotspots or are they in different areas? So having this overlap might indicate conflict-driven humanitarian crisis, whereas differences might reveal other issues like drought causing food insecurity in other regions. Another aspect or question we'd look at the trends over time. We would examine time series graphs. Is violence increasing month by month, or did it spike and drop? Are we, for example, having a seasonal hunger period? Trends help us identify if things are getting better or worse. Another aspect which I think is very important is drivers and context. So we would ask what might be driving those trends. For example, did a ceasefire collapse leading to a new wave of fighting? Are there elections coming up, which usually is connected when political violence increases in a specific country? So these contextual questions might require us to bring in outside knowledge, for example, using news, qualitative reports to translate the data on a CRD. And this is what we call it triangulation, just to get the data, get the context, and also triangulate to confirm the data that we're dealing with and make it more evidence-based. So at this point, I'd like to pose those example questions to you. So if we were all looking at the Sudan crisis risk dashboard, what is one key question you would want to explore? So you can scan the code again or go to the mentimeter.com and use the code. And it's an open-ended question, so you feel free to add your answers to the box. Meanwhile, let me just switch to the other screen so you can see the answers. Okay. Great answers. Crisis events, trends and what factors led to crisis, casualties due to crisis, frequency of events, crisis events by region, where different events are more concentrated, crisis trends. Okay. Yeah, great. You're touching on exactly the important questions that we would look at when we analyze, especially political violence situation. See more answers are coming. Health crisis data, how different indicators correlate, crisis events, where are most critical zones, which factors are influencing the crisis, such as climate or elections. Interlinkages for indicators, parameters, what are the hotspots for humanitarian crisis, number of youth under 30 was affected by the crisis. Interesting. Actors and type, for instance. Does climate change affect level of violence? Cool. So yeah, great answers. This exercise, of course, shows the mindset, which is thinking broadly and connecting the dots, like you mentioned, climate, health, youth. So thinking broadly and trying to make the connection between different conflict drivers or different risk areas. So yeah, this is part of thinking like an analyst, and it's of course the analyst's curiosity and the critical thinking that extract the real insights. And this is something we'll delve more into thinking like an analyst later in this session. Great. So before we dive into the next session, which is going to be the longest one, I would propose taking a 5-minute break, and then we connect to start with the session 2. I'll put the timer on the screen, so we will reconnect in 5 minutes. Thanks. Anyone, if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to in the chat so we can touch on them later. Okay, I hope you had a chance to have a glass of water or a cup of tea. So now we will dive into a second section, which focuses on the data itself. What are the key data sets that we use in crisis risk dashboards? And how do we get from raw data into a functioning CRD? So we will walk through the typical process of developing CRD, basically how we go from identifying what we need to know to gathering the data to designing the dashboard. We will also look at examples of crisis-related data sources and see how they help measure the risks we, of course, care about and we would like to monitor. We will have a hands-on exercise coming up using real conflict data in Power BI that will illustrate how we can quickly visualize the data sets and derive insights. I'm sure that you received the data sets from Andre yesterday, so hopefully you were able to download it and save it on your computer or OneDrive, because we will use it for the hands-on exercise. Again, this section is the longest, so feel free to interrupt with questions as we go through the data part, just to make sure that everyone understands the sources and the rationale behind using them. So we're going to start with the process of developing the CRD. What steps are involved in building one of these dashboards? So how do we get there? How we build it? Can seem overwhelming, pulling together so many data streams and making a user-friendly tool. But we follow a structured process. Of course, this process is done in close collaboration with the country offices or teams who request this tool. So here's a simplified three-stage process. First is the preliminary analysis. We start by identifying the risk factors. So we begin to understand the context and also pinpointing what risks we need to monitor. And this means reviewing, for example, it doesn't have to be from scratch. For example, reviewing existing assessments that were done in a country office or regional bureau, CCAs, conflict analysis, economic outlook, and of course, most importantly, consulting the colleagues in the country or the regional hub. To get, of course, gather their perspectives on this kind of risk and vulnerabilities and threats, because they're the people that have the expertise and the knowledge, especially in country office contexts. So after we do this step, the consultation, the preliminary analysis, we form a risk matrix. We call it the risk matrix. It's basically a table in an Excel file that has a list of the top risks or factors to track. For example, in a given country, the matrix might highlight political violence or food insecurity, population displacement as the three major risk areas. And we will see an example later on. We form hypotheses, like there are the factors most likely that drive a crisis in this context. The second thing is, of course, the data sourcing and design, getting the data and draft the dashboard. So once we know what the users need to monitor, we map potential data sources for each risk factor. For instance, if one risk is political violence as a risk area, then we think about ACLED as a prime data source. If another risk is food insecurity, then we can look at WFP's food security assessments or FAO data that comes into play that updates regularly. We look for indicators that can serve also as a proxies or measures for each risks. Then, as we of course gather and finalize this risk matrix, we gather those data sets, we map if this data is available in the CRD data warehouse. If not, then we work closely with the colleagues to get this data and start putting it into the dashboard. At the same time, as we do this, we start thinking about visualization. And this is where we do usually a design session with the users to understand how best to display the dashboard, what exactly their needs. And this is also just to highlight again that the whole process is co-designed with our end users. So we're not just building a standalone platform by ourselves. We make sure that we get the feedback regularly from the users. For example, if a country team say we prefer a map for conflict incidents, heat map, or trend line for food prices, we do this. And then we put together an initial CRD prototype that have like the sample visuals after doing all the 3 steps. And this stage is very much agile. So we put something workable together as soon as possible, and then can be tested and improved as the users use it and start working on it. So we, after bringing this prototype to the users, whether it's UNDP country office or regional teams or decision makers, gathered feedback. So maybe they find an indicator that's not useful, or it's not relevant anymore, or they need an additional data layer or a certain chart that's maybe confusing. So we adjust accordingly. And a very important point here is why we do this. It's very important to make sure that this dashboard is designed with applications in mind. Just think about how is this will be connected to actual decision-making processes. For instance, if there's, let's say, regional monthly reviews or monthly briefings or let's say interagency meetings. So the CRD should feed into that at the right time. And over time, as contexts change or evolve, we might add new data sources or modify as the context change. So throughout this process, again, we emphasize the user requirements and the iterative agile approach. We don't want to build a fancy looking dashboard that doesn't actually help the people on the ground, or maybe a too complicated dashboard to use. So very important to make sure that you get early and frequent feedback loops from the end users. One thing also to consider is the capacity and maintenance. If there's data coming from a country office, who will update the data? Is there infrastructure to automate this data feeds? Does the country office have someone who can tweak the dashboard if needed? And we have cases with country offices where national UNVs are supporting heavily the work on the crisis risk dashboard. So just to quickly recap, identify risks, make hypotheses, get the right data, and sketch the dashboard. Most importantly, iterate with feedback and make it useful. Now, another pull, so this is the, I think the third one, and we have one more. So let's shift gears and do another quick one, which is about what should be the priority risk areas for analyzing the current situation in Sudan. You will find different options, so you can select more than one option. The choices include political violence, displacement, food insecurity, access to basic services, or economic stability. You can select multiple ones, and as you do this, think of this as not a test, but also part of the analyst mindset when work with dashboards, like a CRD or a dashboard that you're building. So yeah, we'll give everyone a moment to respond and then look at the results together once we see the top risks you've chosen. Let me just change the view to see the results. Okay, political violence is the highest number of votes so far. Food insecurity, displacement, one. Okay, see more votes coming in, so let's wait for a moment. Okay, so just realized that you were only able to select just one. Apologies, that's my mistake, but yeah, I can see that political violence is dominant in this question, food insecurity. Okay. Great. And we'll pause here and get back to our presentation to see the Sudan example when it comes to identifying key risks. Let me share my screen again. Okay. So this is an example of risk matrix for Sudan. I mean, it's a hypothetical one, so very, relevant, given the recent situations in Sudan for the past few years. So let's say we've done our preliminary consultations, risk identification, and we decided that the top 3 crisis risks in Sudan are political violence. We know that Sudan has experienced armed conflicts. For example, the fighting between the military and clashes. We hypothesize that political violence is a primary risk factor, as of course it directly undermines security, even governance, development, the overall situation in the country. And I've listed it the first because if the country is embroiled in conflict, it triggers or worsens many other problems. The second risk is food insecurity. Sudan is also known to have regions with significant food insecurity due to a mix of conflict. Farmers can't plant or markets are disrupted, economic issues like inflation, and even environmental issues like droughts or floods. So this is the second one, is food insecurity. Population, the third one, displacement. So conflict and food insecurity most of the time force people to flee their homes, leading to a large number of internally displaced persons or refugees fleeing to neighboring countries. So this displacement is a crisis factor on its own. Of course, it creates humanitarian emergencies, whether in camps or urban areas where people relocate. And it can also cause tensions in host communities and neighboring regions. And I've written a statement below that these risks are interconnected, which is very important to keep in mind. In the case of Sudan and many others, these factors feed into each other. For example, political violence or conflict can cause people to flee again, which leads us to the displacement factor, and abandon their farms, which reduces food production, which leads us to the food insecurity. So they're all interconnected. If you want to think about it the other way around, let's say the lack of food or livelihood might lead to competition or grievances that spark violence. Let's say displacement on a large scale can strain resources in certain areas, potentially leading to local conflicts or difficulties that maybe, of course, compound the overall instability. So this is how we think about it, like they're interconnected in a way or another. Why do we do this? Because it guides what data we will need. If these are our top three risk drivers, let's say, we then ask, how do we measure each of these? What data can serve as an indicator or even a proxy for each risk? So for political violence, we could, as I mentioned, use ACLID. Just thinking about like out loudly when I look at it, food insecurity, FAO or WFP or IPC. Population displacement, we usually look at UNHCR, IOM, DTM, displacement tracking metrics. So identifying these risks set the stage for the data mapping. And on the next slide, we talk about exactly how we do the matching for each identified risk factor to the appropriate data sources. So in this slide, let's say we've identified the key risk factors for Sudan in the previous slide, which is political violence, food, and security displacement. Now, selecting the indicators and the data source that effectively represent those factors on our dashboard. So political violence, I've mentioned here as a data source, we look at ACLID, which is Armed Conflict Location and Event Database. It's a very well-known data set that collects reports on conflict events, security incidents, protests around the world on near daily basis. It updates regularly. It's very, let's say, big data. It goes back to the 90s, so you can look at historical data if needed. And also it provides details like date, location, very granular. You can look even at coordinates, actors involved, event type, and even like estimated fatalities. So for a CRD, ACLID is extremely useful because it's, again, regularly updated and it's granular. And by feeding ACLID data into this dashboard, we can map conflict hotspots, see the trends, as you mentioned in your answers before, over time. We can see the number of incidents or fatalities. We can filter by event type. So for me, ACLID, as I always say, it serves as a thermometer for violence. So if violence is spiking in a country or a specific location, ACLID data will show it. And we will actually work with a sample of ACLID data in our upcoming exercise and the file that you've already received by Andreas today. Food insecurity. We could look at IPC, WFP indicators. The integrated food security phase, which is IPC classification, is a standardized scale. They have a phase from 1 to 5 that classifies areas based on severity of food insecurity. So phase 5 is being famine. IPC analysis often lead also, IPC analysis usually is led by FAO, not WFP as their partners. Let's say displacement. So looking at the displacement, we usually look at IOM's displacement tracking metrics. And OCHA as well also tracks internal. They usually share regular reports when there's a displacement movement in a specific context. So we can include figures like number of new IDPs this month, let's say total IDPs in camps, or settlements, number of refugees hosted in neighboring countries. So if data is available, sometimes the data can be broken down by region or even by sex. So you can be more granular to understand and generate more insights that could be useful. The last one is the composite risk index. I've mentioned INFORM here. While the other specific data sources or indicators, sometimes we also include the composite index for a big picture view. And INFORM index is such a tool. INFORM basically provides risk score for each country from 0 to 10 scale, based on about 50 indicators covering hazard, exposure, vulnerability, coping capacity. But basically, it's like having a summary of how at risk country is for humanitarian crisis, taking into account things like, hazard frequency, conflict intensity, or population. In our CRDs, we usually include the info risk, and in some countries, it's available at subnational level. So this gives a quick sense of overall risk, even at a subnational level. And it's very useful for comparison and context. So by matching each risk to a data source, we ensure that our CRD will have the right information to monitor those risks. And this list on the slide is not comprehensive. The CRD, again, might have many more data sets, economic indicators, inflation, data from other UN agencies, but also always keep in mind that each data set should tie back to a risk or a question we care about. And in the next slide, I'll show you an example of how different data sets are used. So we have cases where we had data coming from other UN agencies like OHCHR, data from IOM. Some other CRDs use data from the government, including, for example, statistics from the statistical institutes or bureaus, open source like ACLED, as I mentioned, political violence, risk indices, news media. We've had dashboards in countries where they have partnered with CSOs and they were providing them with data, whether it's on hate speech, even political violence as well, and in some cases, private providers like social media, security analysis. And all this data is granular, different when it comes to granularity. Some data is global at a global level, national or subnational. And this all feeds into a crisis risk dashboard. Again, this is not also the full list of the data used in a CRD data warehouse, but just to give an example of how different data sets are being used in the CRD. So now that we've mapped out some key data sources, indicators, the next step is to consider how to visualize them effectively. What should we keep in mind to make sure our visuals are clear and meaningful? So very important points, it's the second one, but I always start with it first, is the audience. Always ask who is going to use this dashboard or chart. Is it, for example, the UNRRs? Is it program colleagues? Is it regional teams? So if this is the case, let's say, for example, UNDP senior management, like RRs or RCs, they likely prefer a quick, big picture visual, like a summary trend, or let's say red, yellow, green risk level indicator, rather than a complex detailed chart. If the audience are programs, colleagues, analysts, information management officer, then more detailed and technical visuals, like, for example, layered maps or scatter plots might be fine. The second thing is content. Of course, choose the right chart type for the data. Different data want to be shown in different ways. For example, maps are great for anything spatial. Trend or line charts are excellent for trends over time. For example, showing the number of incidents, as we will do later in the exercise. Bar charts can compare values. It's also great to, for example, compare fatalities by region. The third point is context. So we need to provide context so viewers translate correctly. This means very important to labeling the axis, indicators, having a title, clearly adding the legends to the maps, and sometimes including brief annotations. For example, if you have a trend line and there's a spike in the number of fatalities and incidents in a specific day, they might want to add like an annotation or a note, for example, elections period, just to give a little bit of context to the user. The fourth point is dynamics. So crisis dashboards are about change. Static number is good, but also the trend can be more important. For example, we have 5,000 IDPs, which sounds moderate, but if it was 1,000 only last week, then this trend is alarming. So just to make sure that we are also spotting the percentage of change when it comes to this kind of numbers. Last but not least is purpose. Perhaps most important, always design with a decision or question in mind. Ask yourself, what question does this chart answer? Or what action could this insight inform? Basically, if a visual does not link to a key insight, maybe we don't need it. So keeping purpose front and center ensures that the dashboard is not just pretty and looks fancy, but actually useful. So for now, as we build our example and you think designing your own visuals, remember audience, content, context, dynamics, and purpose. These will make your charts far more effective in conveying decision support information. And here I'm just showing quick roadmap that maybe will guide you to what would you like to show and guide you to the best chart to do so. I can share this in the chat or share the link so you can keep it as a reference for the future if you want to design a dashboard. It's great. So you can look at comparison, distribution, let's say comparison. Am I looking at something over time or among items? Over time, is it few periods or many periods? If it's few periods, then it will suggest many categories like using a line chart, single category using a column chart, and so on. So before we dive into using Power BI, and again, I hope you were able to download the data file, just briefly introduce the Power BI in case we're not familiar with it. So Power BI is the tool we use for our hands-on exercise today. And it's also one of the tools often used to implement CRDs. So previously we were using Tableau as a data visualization platform, but now we're using Power BI. So it's a business intelligence software, was designed by Microsoft. It's basically all in one platform where we can bring in data, create visuals, and assemble these visuals into dashboards or reports that users can interact with. It's also considered an industry standard tool in analytics. For many years, Power BI has been rated as a leader in the field of business intelligence platforms, along with others like Tableau and other tools. So one of the reasons we like Power BI as well is, especially for training or internal dashboards, is that it's user-friendly. You don't have to be a hardcore programmer to use it. It has a drag and drop interface. You can pull in chart, visual, then drag data feed like number of incidents, date into it, and then you get it like a line chart or a map or whatever you're trying to visualize. Data connections, it's very, Power BI has different data connections in terms of what data it can use. You can import simple files like Excel, CSVs, you can also connect to databases like SQL, let's say. This is where we're hosting our data warehouse, or even directly fetch data from an online service, let's say APIs. So this differentiation of like having the option of different data connections is very important for a CRD because, again, as I mentioned earlier, we pull data from different data sources. Interactive dashboards, a big advantage of Power BI, and of course, similar tools as well, but interactivity is very important. So the user can click on a part of the chart and then other charts respond, filtering, highlighting relevant data. And last but not least, it's sharing and collaboration. Power BI reports can be shared within an organization using the Power BI service online. If you have a UNDP email address or organization address, you should easily be able to log into Power BI online service and create the reports. So for us as UNDP, that means we could publish a CRD dashboard to the internal Power BI workspace, and then multiple teams or country offices can access it via link. You can also control access, who sees what. If there's sensitive data, you can restrict access. And if needed, you can even also embed Power BI visuals in websites or export them to other formats. So now let's get hands-on. We're going to walk through a simple exercise, visualizing conflict data from ACLED using Power BI online service. This will give you a feel for using the tool and also translating the data. So just want to confirm if there are colleagues who have issues with downloading the file or anything you'd like to flag before we start the exercise related to the data file. Please let me know.
So Marwa, there's a couple of questions that are related to the data that you just presented, and maybe it would be helpful to provide a little bit more context. So there's one question for Temdeni, for instance, who asks, how is the level of political violence determined on ACLED, and what indicators are considered?
Let me just trying to check the questions. Maybe can you say that again, Andre, because I don't have access to the screen. How's the level of the political violence? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, yeah. Or Temdeni, if you want to come in and provide more context about your question, please do.
Yeah, I can quote an answer. So ACLED, yeah, has a very specific way of defining and coding political violence. So for ACLED, political violence, they define it as the use of force by a group with a political purpose or motivation, including attempts at gaining political power, changing government behavior, or creating social change. So it's not just fighting between armies, it includes any violence where the intent is political, not purely, let's say, criminal or private. So ACLED records an event where there is reliable evidence of date when it happened, the location where it happened, also coordinates should be provided, actors who was involved, like was it state forces, militias, civilians, and event types, which is also granular, and also fatalities, the number reported, even if it's just estimated. These are the core indicators that are considered when an event is recorded in ACLED database. So the main categories ACLED uses to code political violence, we have battles, violence against civilians, explosions, rumor violence, and mobile violence, riots. So each event is tagged with one of these categories plus subcategory. So it's not just the event type we're looking at. You could also tag it with, for example, let's say battles, it's going to be armed clash or attack or suicide bombing. So they have also this category. What is not political violence when it comes to ACLED? They also track protests. Peaceful demonstrations are coded separately in their dataset. Natural disasters or accidents are not included in this case, for example. Criminal violence is excluded unless it has an explicitly political move. So they focus on the political intent, let's say. And when ACLED records it, of course, they verify the information. And I always mention that data is not going to be always perfect. So if you have kind of like think that the data might not be correct, it's always good to do triangulation. Check the newspapers, check the social media. Maybe this will also convey the events that happened in this data set. But yeah, I mean, it's very popular dashboard data set that we're using, not only us, but also it's been used by other UN agencies and other external institutes. And yeah, we use it. We think it's very useful in our dashboards as a proxy for conflict intensity when it comes to country dashboards or regional dashboards. I hope this answers the question, but yeah, let me know if there are more.
There's one more about the overall data ecosystem when it comes to crisis. So there's a question from Basma, which says the humanitarian data architecture took a hit after the suspension of USAID funds. So what is the risk to the sustainability of the access of the different types of data that we have right now that you're using for these analyses?
I'm not sure if I was able to read the full question, Andre. If you can just post it again, that would be easier for me. Humanitarian architecture took a hit after suspension of USAID. What is the risks? Okay. So yeah, I mean, we all agree on this. So in terms of having this in our CRDs, the impact, let's say, the USAID funding suspension, USAID funded platforms like FuseNet, we were using it, and others that provided like real-time climate, food security, and disaster early warning data, which are now, most of it are offline. And we know that, yeah, this loss is not just temporary. It breaks continuity, potentially leaving, of course, gaps when it comes to historical data and future analysis abilities. So, I mean, this is not only instructing the analysis on the coordination, but also threads the stability for our data architecture. Again, we were using it. So rebuilding these platforms will be much harder without stable support, which directly, of course, impacts our ability to act quickly and quickly to crisis. So we don't have access to this data at this stage, but we're always looking to explore different data sources, other proxy data sets that we could use to, let's say, fill this gap. Yeah, let me know if you have any follow-up questions on this. Otherwise, we could start with the hands-on exercise. Andre, I don't see the screen, so let me know.
Thanks, Mo. No, I think I don't see any more at this point. But if there are any colleagues, please put them in the chat and we'll take them later. Thank you.
Thanks. So I guess we could start to access Power BI. Could you please confirm that you're able to access the Power BI online service that Andre provided you with the link previously, previous emails? If you have any issues, let us know with accessing the Power BI online service. If not, then I'm gonna share my screen again. Hey. Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So what we're gonna do is gonna replicate this dashboard. So we've already provided the data for Sudan using accurate data. So I've already prepared this dashboard yesterday, and the plan is to replicate it and also look at insights, indicators that you're interested to look at, how to use maps, how to also develop these visuals. So just move this. So this is the environment that you should see once you look at the Power BI online service. This is the homepage where you would be landed. And on the left, you will find an option to create. So once we click on it, you will be directed to this page where it's going to ask you to add data to start building a report. So we provided you with the CSV file. We're going to select CSV. And once we select it, it's going to ask you to connect to the data source. So I saved it in my downloads, so I'm going to choose upload file. You can also provide the link to the file if you save it in your OneDrive. But I'm going to just directly upload it and open it. So let's wait for a moment until it loads. Okay. We're going to click on next. And then it's going to start preparing our data. So basically, we're going to simulate a mini CRD, let's say, focusing on conflict events at this point. So now we have the view. Just going to show you the columns that are included in this file that we've shared. Looks fine for me. The date looks good. Here, this order type, it's text, so we can just go ahead and create. Okay. So now that we have our data loaded, without any issues, you will get to see this environment where you will see the working environment to start doing the visualization. So let's start maybe by looking at visualizing the geographic spread of conflict in Sudan. So here's our data and all the columns that are included. This is the visualization area where you can select the visual that you would like to build. And here you can format your report page. And once you have visuals, you can also format your visuals as well. This is for filters. You can use it to customize the view if you wish to, or you can also include filters in the report page itself for the users. So we're going to select a map. Let's maybe select this map. Once we select the map, it's going to show in the working environment. We're going to make it a bubble map to show the exact locations with bubble size representing the event count. So now we have the longitude and the latitude. So we can just click here, click on the longitude, and then maybe also the locations to the location. So as you can see, it's not showing the perfect locations because this data only covers Sudan. This is because the latitude and the longitude already assume that it's going to be a sum. So we're going to change it to just the average, and then it will only focus on Sudan, which is the case in this data that's covering only Sudan. So maybe now we look at the map that highlights hotspots when it comes to the events type. So the bubble size here, as we said, we're going to make it, let's say, the number of events. So in the ACLED data, you will find an event ID, which is a unique identifier. So we can use it for the bubble size. And then you will see that the bubble size is changed. If we zoom in, you will see the exact locations and the number of incidents that happened in a specific location in Sudan. You can also change the bubble size to fatalities, for example. If I want to make the bubble size with fatalities, we can also do this. So maybe just having a look at this directly, I could see that Khartoum, of course, it's a capital, has high number of incidents that were happening over the last period that's covered in this data set. But if I look at this side, which is Darfur, I can see that the bubbles are bigger. This means maybe the events are less than the capital, but they are more like deadly. Because, you can see at Khartoum, we have, of course, fatalities. But then if we look at Darfur region, the bubbles are bigger. So this may be an assumption that the events or the incidents were happening here were the deadliest. So now that we have this just snapshot, which is a map, let's take a look on how we can customize it more and format the visual. If I go to format your visual here, you will find the options for the map. So map settings, you can change the style. If you would like a dark map, or if you'd like a light map, grayscale, and road. So there are multiple options that you can select and you can customize based, of course, on the needs and what you think is more relevant to the layout or to your dashboard. So we made it as a bubble map. You can also change the range scaling. So you can change the size of the bubbles, make it smaller, bigger. You can adjust as you wish. One interesting thing is the color. So usually if I look at this map, I can see that the number of incidents, for example, in Khartoum are the highest, let's say like the intensity of the events. But then using a color that's going to show the intensity of the events, this is going to help in giving the users like a first quick look or snapshot on where the incidents were higher, where they were less. So if we click on colors, the default color here, as you can see, is the blue color. We can click on conditional formatting. So if we click on it, you will get this window that's going to show what the format style would you like. I will keep it as gradient to show from less to more. But then the field that should be based on this, what field should be based on this, we're going to select the sum of fatalities. So let's make the color, let's say, the orange shades. So lowest value will show lighter color, highest value will show darker color. And then we're going to click OK. So now we can see. So we've set the bubble size to show the fatalities. Now we can see that the number of fatalities and the color also shows that this region has the deadliest incidents over this period of time. Of course, you can change the bubble size if you want to make fatalities, or you can keep it as event type as you wish. This is based on the user's need and the requirements, of course. One thing I like always to use is just, for example, having a title. Let's say incidents, intensity, or fatalities. Let's change. You can change, of course, the font. You can make it bold, bigger, smaller, or you can just turn off the title. It's, of course, to you how would you like to do this. Now that we are good with the map, maybe let's think about creating a trend line. For example, showing the number of events and fatalities over time.
Marwa, I'm sorry.
No worries, go
I
ahead.
think several of us having an issue where in order to display the latitude and longitude pairs, the system, the Power BI says set the aggregate for latitude and longitude to don't summarize. And that's why we are not seeing the map. Any guidance how we can?
I received the screenshot from Andre. I look at it now, but I'm not sure if the fields were put in the correct fields, let's say. So if we can make sure that the location is under location, and when it comes to longitude and latitude, just make sure that the latitude is in the right field and make it to average. Because if we don't summarize, it's not going to work in this choropleth map. It has to be average in this case. So maybe just double check the location is set correctly and averages latitude, longitude. Because on the screenshot I received shows the latitude is not there. So maybe just double check. But if other colleagues have the same issue, please let me know. We're using the same data set. So I think it's just a matter of ensuring that the average is set for the latitude and the longitude along with the location.
Thank
But
you.
let me know if it's working or not at this stage before we move to the next visual. Is it still an issue or is
Yeah,
it
no,
working?
it's no longer an issue. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And also just to flag here for the fatalities, just make sure that it's sum and it's not average. Because we're summing the fatalities. While if for event ID, which is a unique identifier, we can always make it as count. See in the screenshot that Andrew showed, it was set on average, but it's always better to make sure that it's sum because we're summing the number of fatalities. It's an overall number. Now from the map, moving to a line chart where we're going to show the trends of incidents and fatalities over time. So for a line chart, we're going to click on it. It's going to appear in the view here. And then, of course, we need a date. So we're going to select event date here. It will be automatically sent to the x-axis. And then we want to see, for example, the number of events. We're going to select event ID. It's going to show the count already. And then we can also add another axis using the fatalities. You can put it under the y-axis as well, or as a secondary y-axis. It's going to be the same. So let's do it like this. So now we have the date, 2 lines that shows.
I'm sorry, can you start over this second part? Some of us
Sure.
are still trying to
Okay.
deal
So-
with the first ones.
Okay. So for the line chart, just make sure that you click on the empty area here, because otherwise, if you keep clicking on the map and then select another chart, it will change the whole chart here. So after building the map, just make sure that you click on the empty area here and then select a line chart. So we have selected the line chart. It's going to appear in the environment here. We will need the date because we're showing a trend. So we're going to select the date from the columns that we have from the data sets. Just click on it. Okay, now we have it here. And then what do we want to show? We want to show the number of events, where we're going to use the event ID. Again, this is a unique identifier, so it shows the total number of events in this data set. Now we have the events showing in this line chart. It's good always to show also fatalities to see if there are any like spikes in fatalities and a good number of incidents, or if there is a low number of incidents but we're deadliest. So let's select the fatalities and put it just under the y-axis. So 2 of them together, count of event and some fatalities, and then the x-axis has the date. Let's just, make it a little better with this, okay. So now we have the year, we have number of events, as we can see in the legends, and we have total number of fatalities. So what we can do here is first, we would like to see, of course, more granular view, not just the year to 2022, 2023, or 2024. So there is a feature in Power BI where you can expand all levels in the hierarchy. Because in the event date, you will see year, quarter, month, and day. While here it's showing us by default only the year. So maybe if we expand all the levels down, you will see now the months, for example. So we have January, we can see now until July 2024, which the data sets cover. If you expand one more, you will be able to see, the previous one was covering the quarters, not only the months. So quarters, and then if we expand down one more level, it will show months, as we can see here. And then one more, it's going to show the day. So this is to the lowest level of this event date format. So again, if you drill up, you will see now the months, one more quarters, one more, it's going to be only show the years. So yeah, usually, it depends on the user's requirements. If they're tracking just monthly trends, then fine, we can show the months, they can drill down. So this is an option that users can decide how they would like the view, how much they would like to drill down to see which level of the hierarchy they would like to explore. So let's keep it as, from days. So now we see the days. If you hover around it, like 1st February, March, 2nd, 3rd, it's very granular at this stage. So yeah, now we have this. We could start looking at formatting the line chart. One thing I always like to do is the lines. I go to the lines directly and I just make sure that the lines are smooth, not linear. This is, I guess, a personal preference, but yeah, I change it to the smooth because if I go one more in the level up, it looks smoother when it comes to the trends and the line charts. You can, of course, keep it as linear or step, but again, my personal preference is to make it smooth. You can, of course, change the width if you want to make it like bigger, smaller. And this is when it comes to the lines. Another thing is the legends. It's very important, as we mentioned earlier. Legends are important to give the user like a snapshot or overview what they're looking at. Because if we just keep it without a legend, I guess it's gonna be vague, what they're looking at, we don't know. Is it like, which one is the number of events, which one is the number of fatalities? So legends are important when it comes to line charts or even bar charts. You can also format the legends. So if you display the legend options, you can change the position. We want it on bottom center, let's say bottom right, yeah, top left stacked. So let's keep it as bottom center for now. And of course, we want to change the title or how it looks like. We're not going to keep it as count of event ID underscore and sum of fatalities. This is very easy to adjust when it comes to changing the titles. So we go back to our visual where we already included the count of events and fatalities in the y-axis. You can just double click here and let's say events. And double click here and make it only fatalities. Now it looks cleaner, let's say. You can always change this directly from the visual window here. You don't have to go to the axis, y-axis and change it directly from there. You can just adjust it directly from the view here. Now, let's maybe change the title. We go to the formatting of our visual. We can go to general. The title is here, it's on. We can just call it a timeline, for example. You can change the font, CQUI, bold. You can change the color of the font as well. Let's not keep it blue because we have blue for the fatalities. Let's do this timeline. So now we have, let's say, a clean version of the line chart. You can see that the number of events at some point were higher than the usual. And this shows, for example, Q2 2023. This is where the political situation in Sudan started. So this explains why we see this high number of events in this specific period of time. You can even drill down and you can look, for example, at a specific day, like why the numbers of incidents were really high. This shows November. We have a number of fatalities with 1,024, while the events are 16. So this explains that these small number of events were actually the deadliest among this period of time. Again, you can drill up, you can show, by year, quarter, month. This is something that you can maybe leave it up to the user if they want to, how they want to view the data. Before I move to the next bar chart, were you able to follow for the line chart at this stage? Everything okay? Great. Okay. Now, maybe let's move to the bar chart. Let's maybe create a bar chart that shows the type of events. And we can see also what does the data tell us, like which type of event were the deadliest at this stage. So we're gonna again click on an empty space here, just to make sure that we're creating a new visual, we're not replacing the one that we're doing. So we're gonna click here. We are going to select, let's say, a clustered bar chart. In this case, we're gonna have it here. And then we will go and select event type. So event type, in this case, for this kind of visual, it requires, of course, the x-axis to be added. So we're gonna look again at fatalities, which are the main indicators in ACLED data, and the number of events. You can also move it up or down to show these are the number of events, and we have this number of fatalities. So now we can see that type of events, for example, battles, shows the highest number of fatalities, while the events were like around 3,800, while the fatalities were 17,900. Violence against civilians comes next, protests, explosions, remote violence, riots. So what we're going to do now is we're going to format it again. First, we can just change the titles here, just to make it consistent with the rest of the visuals. So events, click on tab, and then this one is fatalities. What would be useful in this case is that if we go to format your visual, we could also add data labels. So it makes it easier to the user to spot the number of incidents or events or fatalities in this case. You can also change the color if you select bars, if you want to select bars. So we previously did this for lines. Now we have a bar chart. If we select bars, we can select the series. Events are blue. Fatalities is the same color here. Maybe I would change this actually to a red color to show that it's fatality. Let's maybe select fatalities. And the color, let's make it, let's do this. And this one, we go to bars, we select fatalities, we select the recent color that we've selected. So now we could see that the events type by the number of events or incidents and fatalities at the same time. So again, we use the data label to show the actual counts. This also emphasizes clarity, unlike, for example, pie charts that make it easy to compare categories. Now, so we are very short in time, but I'm going to create one more visual that could be really useful in comparing data by locations. So we could go to the second page. We could select another clustered bar chart. But instead of having the event in the y-axis, we could select the admin one, which is administration boundaries, one level. So it's like the governorate or province. It's different from country to another. So we're going to select the admin. We're going to see the number of events here and the number of fatalities. So now we're able to see like, for example, in Khartoum, which is the capital, has the highest number of fatalities and the highest number of incidents. Second thing is if we combine Darfur, North Darfur, South Darfur, West Darfur all together, it's going to be the second. So this is just to give us an overview of how the situation looks like at that admin one level, just to give more like a granular view, looking at where the events are most happening, what can we do there in a specific province or a specific area. So having said that, I'll pause here. Let me know if you have any questions. I was planning to do another chart showing also the actors, which could be also relevant because you've mentioned this earlier. It's going to be the same. I'll just quickly do it. You can also copy and paste it. So I just copy and paste it, and I'm just going to change the admin one here to using the enter one, which is the actor. So now we have the same visual with two different views. So now we could see which actors has, let's say, contributed to the highest number of events and fatalities in Sudan. One last thing to flag, which I think is very useful in Power BI, is they have the ability to generate narratives. If you select narratives here, and then you're going to create custom, it will create, it's going to be an AI generated insights, like a quick overview. For example, it's now showing us that Khartoum had the highest number of events. East Darfur, which had the lowest count of events, if you look at it here. It says Khartoum counted for 43% of the total number of events. Number of fatalities and counts of events, the most admin one was West Darfur. It also shows in some cases, like for example, that fatalities and events are correlated. So some cases you will find high number of events, at the same time, higher number of fatalities. So this is very interesting feature in Power BI. You could use it, and we're using it in our dashboard to give an overview of like a snapshot to the user of what's happening. So they can later on dig deeper and maybe also apply the multi-dimensional risk analysis. Again, before we move back to the presentation, I'll stop here, but let me know if you were able to follow. If not, you can watch the recording again. We can share the slides also with the instructions. But at this stage, I will stop here for sake of time. Let me know in the chat, or if you'd like to jump in. If you were able to follow, or if you're able to at least produce 3 visuals while you're working on it.
Marwa, thank you. Can I just ask a quick question instead of typing in the chat? Maybe
Yeah, sure.
some colleagues will be also interested. For some of us who would like to, for example, to get a deeper knowledge on Power BI, what would you recommend how to basically to study it to be like more professional on Power BI? What resources maybe or platforms to learn?
Great. So for this, I mean, I'm sure many of you will be curious to know more and dig deeper in Power BI. So I would say start with the basics. I have some recommended beginner resources, which is also provided from Power BI. I can share it with you, which is a guided start with Power BI, like step by step, and it's also free tutorials. It's from Microsoft. And there are also other channels that I personally prefer from YouTube. I can share this with you as a resource after the session that you can also follow as the basics of the Power BI. But as a first, I would say just download Power BI desktop in your computer. It's for free, and you can just use any data that you are dealing with on a daily basis or regular basis and build simple visuals, along with doing, of course, other courses. So I'm more than happy to share the resources with all of you after the session. And you can follow. But I would say Microsoft has a great resources when it comes to Power BI that you could follow. And this is how I started actually, because it has like a kind of clear path to study from A to Z and from basic to like beginners, intermediate, and then advanced. So I'll make sure to share this with you and the colleagues after the session. And anytime, please feel free to shoot me a message if you have any questions triggering the Power BI. I'll be more than happy to support, of course.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, Marwa. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would like to ask that because the map that you currently use is Microsoft, so is this UN map compliant?
That's a great question. No, it's not.
So if it's not, so what are the options that normally that you will recommend to use?
That's a great question. So we have the GEO hub of the UNDP, which is the we have an option to use ArcGIS for Power BI.
Yeah.
If you have a UNDP email account, you would be you can use the GEO hub. Not sure, Andre, you could also share the link with the colleagues. I believe some of the colleagues already provided the training on this.
Yeah, so the ArcGIS is powered by the Esri, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So
You
this
find
one
a
is
lot of maps that,
UN compliant, right?
Many of them that are there that colleagues use are UN, apply to the UN. But also in our case here, we always add a note that this map,
Disclaimer.
yeah, exactly, a
Yeah.
disclaimer for the users, just to make sure that, yeah, we're annotating this information for them.
Okay, thank you for confirmation. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I see another hand raised.
Santiago, would you like to come in?
First question, I just want to add that I'm also a Mac user. But if you log into powerbi.com, you will be able to use your UNDP email and log into your account. So that's, I don't know if that's new, but I have been using that in that way.
Yeah, thanks, Santiago. Maybe we could just quickly go back to the last few slides because we're running out of time. If that's okay. And you can, of course, play around with the data later on. If you would like to provide feedback, for example, again, feel free to share the visuals. And I can also share the sample dashboard that I prepared here, if you would like to replicate it as an exercise. So you'll be able to see the visuals, what did I use exactly, and use the same formatting. Okay, just go back to the presentation. We were planning to take a break, but I think it's not happening since we're running out of time. So I just have the last few slides that's gonna finish my presentation with, which I think is very important to flag at this stage. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, thank you, Marwa.
Great. So we have done simple visualization. We looked at some, let's say, trends when we did the trend line, etc. So now how we move from data visuals to decision support. First thing is, I always like to start with is the mindset. Thinking like an analyst is the foundation. The first step is to frame the right questions and make it precise and actionable. Instead of asking, for example, something vague like what's happening in Sudan, we need like more concrete question like why did displacement suddenly increase in Darfur? So a clear question saves time and leads directly to better decisions. Second thing is we need to validate data quality. Data, of course, as I mentioned, is never perfect, maybe incomplete, delayed, even biased. So if we don't check our sources and assumptions, we risk making decisions different, like basic decisions on faulty evidence, let's say this. A third, explore the patterns and outliers. As we saw just now in the line chart, there was like high number of fatalities with low number of events. So this can help us spot the trends and unusual spikes. But then moving forward to action, the real skill is asking what stands out here and why. Like, why did we have this high number of fatalities while low number of incidents? And finally, context is really important, whether it's politics, environment, culture, seasonality. Data without giving context is just numbers. So we always need to make sure that we're connecting the dots. We've already touched on this dashboard design for insights. Again, know your audience and purpose. As I mentioned, for example, an RC does not need a complex scatter plot. They would just want a headline or a snapshot showing trends, insights, and that's it. Focus on key metrics, as we just did now with ACLED, number of fatalities, number of incidents, and thirdly, choose visuals wisely. We use the map to show the intensity of the events. We use charts to show comparisons, and we use line chart to show the trends. Keep it simple. Dashboard, I mean, should read like a narrative, like showing the picture. Fancy dashboards are not always conveying the full picture or very useful for the users, so keep it simple. Dashboards are not just pretty fancy pictures. They're tools to tell story and support decision. And lastly, from findings to action, we must translate findings into recommendations. So dashboard should not just stay like, yeah, we have high number, as I mentioned, high number of incidents, low number of fatalities, or the other way around. we need to maybe just translate these insights into findings. And then, of course, eventually, this should feed into the recommendations of the senior management and the leadership team in a country or region. Use plain language, avoid any jargons. They won't land. Clear, simple wording ensures decision makers act on what we show them. And lastly, you can set thresholds and alerts. Like in Power BI, you can set the thresholds. For example, if protests exceeded 1,000 in a week, then the dashboard will send an alert to the users, showing that something is happening, for example. And lastly, always, of course, link insights to decisions options. So this is what insights I was able to produce from the dashboard that I created. So for decision makers, we need to just give a quick insight. It's always good to provide kind of narratives. For example, here, insights are conflict hotspots. Khartoum, as we've seen, 40% of all events were consistently the most violent states. Therefore, fewer events, but disproportionality, high fatalities per event, so more deadly violence. So as an analyst approach, would dig deeper and understand why we have this kind of insights. Actors, the conflicts is primarily between the Sudanese armed forces and rapid support forces. We still have local militias that are active, particularly in Darfur. Trends over time, we could look at major spikes that are linked to different events that are happening, whether it's, let's say elections, ceasefire, etc. So implications for decision-making, this is the big picture. For example, this is just an assumption. For Khartoum, or decision makers could prioritize, let's say, security monitoring or contingency planning. For Darfur, they could scale up humanitarian response and protection measures due to high civilian fatalities. So this is the kind of outcome that we would like to get out when we develop a crisis risk dashboard. So we have the data, the platform, the nice visuals, the insights are important, but then this is where we want this to feed in eventually, which is supporting decision-making and action. So yeah, at this point, I guess we've covered a lot from what CRDs are, data sources, visualization, design best practices, to applying also insights. So yeah, just added a note here that numbers alone don't save lives, but clear insights linked to action do. We always keep this in mind when you are designing a dashboard and you're also conveying like an insight with senior management or decision makers in a country office or regional office. Yeah, I guess I'll stop here. We've covered some of the questions. I'm not sure if we missed any. Andre, please let me know. But maybe before some of the colleagues leave, I would like just to run the last poll just to get a sense of here, like the key takeaways you're leaving this session with. I know it might sound like too much information. Try to cover the most important things when it comes to CRDs and decision intelligence. So this could be also something you learned, something that surprised you, or an action point you plan to implement. So it'd be great if you could go back to Mentimeter and yeah, just add your inputs here. Just for me also to get a sense of how useful was the session today. Let me just share other screen again. How could we get ACLED for other countries? So ACLED is an open source data. So you could use their website directly to get ACLED data for other countries. They have a data export tool where you could just select the country, customize the date that you would like to export the data for, which actors, you can customize it as you wish. So first you need to register. Again, it's free account, email and password. Once you're registered, you can download the data sets for the countries. But also we are in the process of developing our CRD API, and this is going to include ACLED as well. So we're in the process of testing it at this stage, and this API will include different data sources and data sets that we're using in the CRD, not just ACLED. Global indices, indicators, World Bank, economic outlooks, data, food security data, displacement. So we're basically gonna make the data that we're using in the CRD publicly available through this API. It's still a work in progress, but it could be useful to use, for example, the CRD API to also do the multi-dimensional risk analysis, where you can use ACLED along with other data sources that are in this API. But yeah, if you're looking just to test it or you're interested only in ACLED, you can just go to the website. They cover all countries globally, and you can just easily export the data from their website. Okay, maybe showing previous question. Apologies for this. Guess now it should show the last question, which is the key takeaways. If you can refresh your view, I guess should be able to see it now. Can see some answers in the pool and other answers in the chat. So I'm trying to thank you so much for joining the session, and it's really great to hear that you were able to at least grasp one takeaway or action points you're leaving with today. And again, please feel free to shoot me a message if you would like to learn more about CRDs. If you have any question about Power BI, more than happy to help and support data presentations. Great, thank you so much, and thank you for staying after the set time for this session. Andre, would you like to say anything?
Just a big thank you to you, Marwa. Thanks for the great session. Thanks everyone for staying a little bit over. I hope it was useful. I thought it was great that we could spend so much time on Power BI, and it looks like the comments here are mostly reflecting that. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Marwa or to me. Feel free to use the Spark Blue discussion group as well, so we can also make all those questions and answers public to everyone in the Academy. Thanks again. Our next session is on data privacy, and it's our last live session for this cohort. Tomorrow you'll get all the usual recordings, exercises, and additional resources that Marwa mentioned. So please pay attention to that. And I'll also share a review of the completion requirements that you've already seen. So just a reminder, really. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks again to you, Marwa, and see you next week.
Thanks. For the rest of the day. Thank you.
Bye. Many thanks.
Bye.
Bye.